Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Ghost Bottle uncorking episode for all of you who are interested in this sort of thing. Uh, on the call with me this evening, I have Monique Houston and I have Travis Baker. You might have read a quote or two of his in my shop. You won't be able to see him because he's old and doesn't know how to work technology, but his phone is working, so you'll be able to hear him. But more importantly than Travis, by a landslide, is Monique. And Monique is the vice president of wholesale sales for WIBO, as well as I think one of, I'm not exactly sure how many women in Keepers of the Quake there are, but
It's what's funny is I'm sure someone has a role. Obviously someone knows this, but it's not like accessible even as a member. Like I can't go check it, and there's no
yeah.
way publicly, like you can't Google it and just go check it. I don't know.
But I mean, that's probably the most badass title you could have. I don't. You might think there's a better one that you have, but I think it's pretty badass. I think.
Well, it once you're a keeper for 10 years, you can get nominated to be a master of the Quake. And that's gotta be my next benchmark. So that'll be 4 years before I can see if that happens. But
That's amazing.
yeah, it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's like a lot of the big wigs kind of in the industry. If you think of like Richard Patterson from Dalmore, or something like that, people that have been in the industry like him for over 50 years, have probably been masters. But it's only been in existence since the 80s. It came about as a result of the fact that in the late 70s, early 80s, America was going through this kind of a depression, and we weren't drinking blended scotch, which meant that we weren't drinking single malt scotch. And that's why so many distilleries closed from 1979 to 1985 in Scotland. So that's when we lost, like Brora and Port Ellen and all these beautiful legendary distilleries, because they actually thought that the Scotch whiskey market might collapse. And so the Keepers of the Quake started as an organization between the heads of what would now, I mean, I don't even know if this would ever happen now, but the heads of Pernod Ricard, Diageo, what those companies used to be, they all banded together and said, we have to all do the right thing for single malt scotch. And so the Keepers of the Quake, the Masters of the Quake, the program is just people who give their life in service of single malt. So yeah, it was cool. I got surprise inducted in 2014. I can't even believe it was that long ago now. It was like it's first week of October in 2014. So I should have been over there 2 weeks ago at the dinner celebrating the new inductees.
So what is that? I mean, apart from it just being like a huge honor now, what does that look like for you as a member?
It's like we have a private Facebook group, so I can go see interesting things over there. But, there was never, there wasn't a formal US chapter or meeting until this year. And actually, like Jonathan Yosef and from William Grant & Sons and Frank Coleman from Discus, like some of the kind of bigwigs, they pulled a group of us together and they held the first like US members dinner. And I think that will be ongoing. But I mean, I guess it would have been, if the industry was still in a shambles, I guess they would be asking, it would be like a call to arms, like all of us have to get together. But it's kind of interesting because I'm friends with the British consul here, and we're actually going to do an event. They came to me and said, Scotch sales are down 35%, as a direct result of this 25% tariff on single malts. What can we do? And it's like, Scots are kind of notoriously cheap, but it was like, they have a budget. And so we're actually going to do, my friend Brett, who runs Binny's liquor stores here in Illinois, I'm based in Chicago. We're going to do a completely blind tasting for 100 people. And hopefully that will be the first in a series of events, but just to drive enthusiasm, make sure that people, because I feel like that kind of, the tariff and the higher cost has just kind of turned off maybe new potential Scotch drinkers. So we just, we're going to engage more people. And
That's awesome. I actually have a competition like club that we do every once in a while, which is a blind tasting competition. So we did at the store. We sent people home with scorecards and blank bottles where only we know what's in each one, and then people fill out their cards as best they can. They score them, and then person who gets the best score gets like $100 gift certificate and some swag and stuff like that from our store.
That's-
So I love blind tastings, and Travis and I drink a lot together, and
For science.
oftentimes it ends up being blind.
Science and work. Well, it also, I love the idea of, if you can, I've been doing whiskey for, 22 years. So that's been my whole life in the industry. But I'm not going to say, you could just hand me something and I'm going to nose it and smell it blind and go, oh, this is, I could probably narrow it down. I could probably get it pretty close, but I think there's very few people who could do that. But I love it as a vehicle for not being attached to what you think a distillery's profile is, or what this price point means something should taste like, or what I don't know. Yeah. Just that you're not affected at all by the marketing or the pricing or other people necessarily around you saying things that are influencing how you taste. So I love that. Yeah. We're going to do, for our event in a couple weeks, we're going to basically each have kind of a set of clues that are tells, so that kind of we can watch everybody as a group kind of figure out what it is. So we want everybody to know what it is, by the end. But yeah, it's going to be really fun. But it's been interesting just having even like the British consulate, reach out and say, we need help with this. Like, who are some people that can help us with these efforts? Yeah, it's a great group. It's super fun when you get to go to the dinners. Like if you're in Scotland, seeing the new inductees. The class that I got inducted in, you get inducted in alphabetical order. And Mickey Heads, who just retired from Ardbeg last week, Mickey got inducted the same class as me. So he was standing in front of me and he's my friend. And I'm like, you were the master distiller at Jura and now you're at Ardbeg. Like, who am I? I'm like this girl that owned a bar in Nebraska. Like, what am I even doing here? It was so crazy to have someone who's just so iconic and so talented. And you're like, it was really, it was really surreal, really, really surreal.
That's amazing. Well, I think we've sufficiently convinced people that you deserve to be the one that tells us about this whiskey.
You and Travis are drinking it. You guys tell me. Do you like it?
So the pick for this month is the Boutique Whiskey Company's Japanese blended whiskey #1. It's 21-year-old whiskey from who knows where. No one apparently is allowed to say anything about where it comes from, but it's 21-year-old Japanese whiskey, and I will tell you that I've already started drinking it, and I could tell you kind of where it's not from. And if you want to have that conversation, I would rather it not be recorded, so you can come talk to me.
I was going to say, don't record that, because he's going to come back and censor it. Those are fun conversations to have, though, especially with some of these boutique bottlings, because there's a lot of kind of process of elimination, and you're never going to get a straight answer. I will tell you, yeah, we can go offline with this, Chris, but we can get it down to 2.
Yeah. That's exciting. It's as someone who's already cracked it open, clearly I've consumed some. It's got a great nuttiness to it. It's really rich. It's not as delicate as I was expecting. And for 21 years, it's definitely not over extracted in terms of the wood. It's got.
So when you say like delicate as I was expecting, are you just comparing to like other Japanese grains or malts or just other Japanese whiskeys, or like, I don't know, like what's your benchmark?
I would say I was comparing to when I crack open a bottle of unidentifiable Japanese whiskey. I kind of automatically expect it to be delicate off the bat.
Yeah, I think the sheer age is going to be the first thing that really changes that. Because I know even me, I'm sure you too, you get to taste tons of stuff. But how many Japanese whiskeys are even out there that are over age stated anymore? Like that's tough enough to find. But it's like then when you get to the 12, 18, 21, 25, it's like I've had, drips and drabs of things that are over 12 years old probably. So I don't have, necessarily as much familiarity across the range of like aged Japanese, but I'm with you. I think that most of the time a Japanese whiskey, just like on the nose, is pretty clearly characterized by kind of delicate, you said floral, sometimes these kind of light fruity, orchard fruit. Sometimes depending on the whiskey, especially if it's aged any part of it in Mizunara oak, you'll get that really, Mizunara to me is this kind of potpourri, musky, you know, almost like it's got some really interesting like scent to it because that wood is so unique and that wood profile is so unique. But this is so old, this really would have predated anyone even crazy enough to think about using Mizunara to age.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that's sort of fun is talking about, obviously this is independent bottling, right? So it's not, it's chosen by people who know booze, who get access, who say, yes, that's the barrel that I want. And Boutiki just happens to be one of those brands that I will always trust them now. You know, I've been lucky enough to have, I think, I don't know, Travis, what, 6 or 7 different bottlings from them that you've tasted me on?
Made you taste? Yeah, I'd say probably somewhere around there.
They're all
over the world too, you know, like
all over the world.
Well, and they're interesting. I know they won't usually say it, and they kind of like side glance at me like when I say it, but one of the interesting things with them that like very few people know, they were purchased by the beverage arm or the alcoholic beverage arm of AB InBev a couple of years ago.
No way.
So yeah, so they're actually owned now, fully owned by ZX, which is like their, you know, kind of like, I don't know if they want to take like this little brand and build it up into this huge thing. And part of it is that they are part of the Master of Malt group, which has the Master of Malt website and ships whiskey all over the world. And they have a really strong, well-known e-commerce platform. So I think that was kind of the in, is they saw like, oh, you're doing all this e-commerce in China and Taiwan and all these emerging markets that they wanted access to. And they've got, you know, very, very prolific website and shipping all over the UK and things like that. But it was really interesting. That meant that their budget for what they could go spend on casks went up exponentially overnight. So, you know, you don't normally see kind of a young upstart indie bottler get access to what Boutiki gets access to. Right. You know, when I think of those, the old school indie bottlers that I'm totally with you, Chris, where I'm like, I would drink anything Cadden Heads puts in a bottle. Signatory and Andrew and the team put in a bottle. Gordon MacPhail, I'm one of the oldest ones. Those three, blind, hand me any of those whiskeys and I trust where they came from and the people that picked the barrels. But then, you know, in the past 5 years, and you as a retailer, how many independent bottlers? I mean, now there's like 30 or 40 of them, tons. And so it's like, are some of them getting the seconds and the thirds and the things that got passed over from other people? And I do think that sometimes that's the case. Are they getting things that maybe didn't taste the way that someone wanted them to on their face, but they said, that's fine, I'm going to finish it in a port cask or a rum cask, I'm going to rejuvenate it, I'm going to brighten it. But with the Boutiki guys, they don't have a warehouse. So they buy things as they want them to be consumed. They basically will get bottled, you know, within a couple weeks. And this AB InBev investment meant that they had this windfall that kind of bolstered them to the top of the line in terms of people buying casks. So all of a sudden it was like, we had Port Ellen, we had Brora, we've had Kurosawa, branded Kurosawa, this beautiful 21-year-old Japanese. I'm not doing it yet, but I'm going to sip on their Isla 25, which I think is just absolutely stunning. But and they're not cheap, but I think they're completely worth it. But it's just so interesting to me.
You know, like this guy it's pricey. It's 21.
Do you have huge hands, or is that a small bottle?
It's a small bottle. It's a 375, and I'm like Andre the Giant, really.
It's weird because I have a liter. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Do you have a liter?
No, it was a bad joke.
Oh, I was going to get mad at you all over again. All over again. Travis is in the doghouse this week. You know this, but
I don't want to know.
Chris finds things to get mad at me for.
Bottle of this made, right?
How many?
940.
That's what I was going to say. I think it was just under 1,000. So it was a few casks that were vatted together. The move to go to a 375 was very. I made that choice along with the person that was exporting to us, because in the UK these are bottled in a 700 milliliter or 70 centiliter, and that's not legal in the US. So our choice was to go to a liter or to go to a 375 because they had both those bottles in production. And my thought was, if this is a liter, that's a $500-600 bottle in front of me.
Right.
So how many people
nobody affording that?
Right. And two, then it's like, you know, when you pay that much for a bottle, how do you even decide when to open it? you know, everything feels like the special occasion, you know, it's like, when are you going to drink it? You know, are you going to share it with your friends? Are you, you know, and so the thought was that people maybe, and I have a tendency when I find something really special that semi-affordable to buy two.
Yeah.
Open one, share it, drink it, and then kind of archive one. And so the thought there was this would make it accessible to lots more people, because if we had to have done this, so 940 bottles in liters, there would have been 300 bottles that cost $600. And it's like only 300 people would have had access to it.
Or more due to rarity, you know, whether you're looking at secondary market or retail markups, or even just your own price just due to demand, right?
Yeah, I Googled it just because I was curious earlier today, and it's I'm sorry, these are 50 CL in Scotland. What am I talking about? They're not 70 CL, they're 50 CL.
Yeah.
So it was either we could go to a liter or 375. So they're 500 milliliters there. This bottling in a 50 CL, so what is that? Another 30% more whiskey in it, is flipping for like 500 pounds in the UK right now. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So
That's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, the whiskey's great. I mean, I think the whiskey's absolutely worth it. I've always said to people too, if we've had it at a show or like been able to share it with friends, it's like, it's not going to taste necessarily like a Japanese grain or something that is column distilled. That's going to be a little bit kind of like sweeter and maybe a little bit less nuanced. But this is like, if you taste this and you don't like it, you really don't like Japanese whiskey. Like there's just, to me, there's no way that somebody's not going to absolutely love this.
Well, what's fun about drinking 21-year-old Japanese whiskey and knowing it's 21-year-old Japanese whiskey is that it predated the boom of Japanese whiskey, right? So this is before anybody was really looking, I don't know, to make a name in Japanese whiskey, or, you know, abroad. No one was just, I don't know, saying sort of like just what we've seen, you know, dropping the no-age statements, making things really just difficult to get a hold of, and just filling in, or creating this overtly superior line that we're like, well, that one didn't work out this way, so we'll just leave that in barrel and hope that it works out okay. Well, it's too old now, so now we'll sell it to someone else. Like this is Japanese whiskey that is as traditional and as lovely as I think some people might sort of remember Japanese whiskey tasting like when maybe they were first introduced, if they were lucky enough to be introduced.
Like back when you could find Yamazaki 12 or Yamazaki 18.
Yeah.
And I think you're 100% correct in that, because the other thing is that so many of the things coming to the United States right now, while they might taste great, I mean, but they are not even legally whiskey in Japan. So like the laws for what you can export that say Japanese whiskey on the bottle are totally different than what the Japanese, you know, government, but also, you know, people who are producing the alcohol say, okay, you can consume this as Japanese whiskey in Japan. And so a lot of it, I mean, ends up being rice-based, or it's like distilled sake, or it's totally legal to bring whiskey from Canada, from the United States over, and it could age there for a day and you could call it Japanese whiskey.
Right.
So what we have in that bottle is this time capsule, like you said, of something the way that it kind of should be if you're a purist like I am, but also if you're just kind of getting into Japanese whiskey and maybe you've had some other ones that are that kind of distilled sake, or maybe it's just like a Speyside Scotch and you're like, oh, I thought this would be more different. I thought this would be more unique. You don't really know what you're drinking. I mean, you can kind of Google it, you can figure it out, but this has the pedigree and the age that it's like, if you taste this, you go, oh, okay, I understand why people fell in love with this. I understand why the category exploded.
So on that note, when let's say the average consumer is looking now, let's say they get wind of that, you know, and they hear that and they know, what are some things to look for the average consumer when they're buying Japanese whiskey to, you know, drive them in, we'll say the right, you know, the right direction. I mean, I for one, I like knowing the laws. I know like everything, but delicious is just delicious, you know, and if you like it, you like it, and that's fine. So just go ahead and drink it. But if you're looking to experience something, or you're keeping your eyes out for something, what are some tricks or just important things to look at? Or is it just all smoke and mirrors at this point?
I mean, we have the most powerful computers like the world has ever seen in our hands now, you know, so it's like you can Google things and find out. But, you know, use of like an age statement. that means something, you know. So you start to see things 12 plus whatever years old, all these tricks and kind of the smoke and mirrors, that didn't exist then. That's like a newer phenomenon as the market really exploded. You know, so I think if you can find something age stated, even if it's 8 years old, that's still kind of, that was kind of right when this happened, you know, when the Yamazaki won the, you know, started winning really big awards. I think too, looking for things that are bottled over 46% alcohol. And I'm kind of like that with all Scotch, because 46% is the point at which you can't add color and you can't chill filter. So you might have added water because you think it tastes better in a little bit more diluted form. But if it's over 46%, it's largely not tampered with.
Is that the same for Japanese as it is for Scotch?
The alcohol percentage doesn't chemically is like the only colorant that you can use is the same in across the whiskey industry. It's E140A. So E140A doesn't stay in solution over 46.3%.
Oh,
that's really
so,
no.
Yeah, so that's like, okay, then they haven't like adulterated it with color, you know, or something like that, which is not to say, you know, that it's made out of one thing or another. I think use of the word, if you know that you typically like you know, a single malt versus like a blended whiskey or whatever, is looking for the word malt. Because if that's on there, and I find that to be the same across Irish whiskey, you know, Scotch whiskey, whatever it is, if you're into malt, you know, then make sure that the word malt is on there. Yeah, so I mean, just a few things, but like you said too, Chris, I mean, if the price point makes sense, you buy something and try it and you like it, that's awesome. I mean, that's great. Like I enjoy all those things. I can't wait for the time. I really hope that there's a time when there's more transparency in that industry, you know, because I know the three of us have tasted, you've definitely tasted stuff where you're like, this is Speyside single malt Scotch. Like I can 100% tell blind that that's what that is. And then there's been nothing unique added to it. There's been no innovation. There's not even, finish it in Mizunara, age it near the sea in Japan, like do something distinctly Japanese, because otherwise I really think it's a kind of a turnoff to the whole category.
Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot more. You know, I mean, there's on whiskey threads, just talking to customers coming into the shop. A lot of people are saying that. They're like, well, you know, it's kind of the same with Canadian whiskey. Like, well, why am I going to drink it unless you know that it's specifically like from Alberta, right? Or if you know specifically that it's coming from Yoichi. You know how, and some people, you know, and a lot of people don't even know that, you know, that amount. So you can see people already getting turned off because they feel like they've been duped. Just,
yeah, absolutely.
You know,
yeah, I mean, I do know too, just talking to a friend in the Canadian whiskey industry, that Canadian whiskey exports in like plastic, big, like the tankers that they put over in ships, they're up 6 times the exports in Japan in the past decade.
Jesus.
So they're like, it's going over there to do something, you know. And so maybe that's like the neutral, you know, maybe that's like the corn or the rye base that's really high proof, you know, like you would use in a blended Scotch, and maybe it's got some Japanese malt in it. Who knows? But I try to stick more to what I know, unless I'm at a show or I'm at a store or I'm at somewhere where I can kind of taste it for free and go, okay, I would invest in a whole bottle of that. You know, otherwise I really do the research up front before buying something.
Well, and anybody who's lucky enough to see this recording early enough, I'm definitely sitting on just a few more of these. So if you like it, come get it. You know,
yeah.
It doesn't do me any good to sit on it. I'd much rather have other people just drink it.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you allowed, like, do you have like a club where people can get samples and they can share stuff with you, or can you legally like split things into samples? And
I can legally split things into samples. I was doing it before that. I thought that I could do it legally, but I found out that it's totally legal. I had to do one thing extra to seal the bottle, and then it became totally legal. So, yay! I didn't break
awesome.
the law. We can't taste in store. At least not consumers. In California, it requires an entirely other liquor license, and having just opened up this year, we can't afford an entirely other liquor license because, you know, apocalypse. So it's been rough. We're aiming for it, we're looking for it, but we're not quite there yet. But that being said, one of the things that I like to do is if somebody's interested in a bottle that I happen to have open, or it's not outrageously expensive or rare, I will put it in a little bottle for them to take home and try. And then if they like it, then come back and get it.
That's awesome.
I've even started just having samples next to the register. So with purchase, people show up and they have some. I'm like, here, try some of this. Try some of this.
Oh, that's a great. I actually don't know anybody that's doing that I'm aware of. That's really smart.
Hey, if it works for C's Candy, it might work for me.
Oh my God, it's my husband's favorite. It is good. It is really good. Yeah. I love that. No, these are gorgeous. This is such a fun excuse to go back and revisit this. And I'm like, well, and so it's fun too. Travis has been on one of our initial educational calls, but we are going to start bringing in a range of whiskeys from a team in Japan next year that are all fermented using koji. So they're barley, they're single malts, but they're not, they're barley, but they're not malted. It's all using the koji saccharification process. And they're called Takamine. And so it's called the Takamine process. It's named after Dr. Takamine. And he initially formed this process. He isolated adrenaline. He's very, very famous for isolating adrenaline and saving millions of people's lives. But before he did that, he developed this Takamine process. He came to the United States. He married an American woman. This is in the late 1890s. And then they actually lived outside of Chicago. They built a distillery a couple hours south of Chicago, and they had this bourbon distillery basically, but they were using this koji saccharification. And he went to a meeting with a bunch of other big distillers, and he said, I've improved on this process of the barley part, or even how they were fermenting corn. And it was much more efficient. And within a month of him kind of letting this, this kind of scientific discovery out, his distillery burnt down. And so there were people that the way that they'd always done things was the way that they wanted to do things. They didn't want this increased efficiency. They didn't want him to have the upper hand, and he wasn't American and all these other things. So 2 different times there were very suspect fires that destroyed all kinds of things. And so at the end of the day, he took his wife and he went back to Japan and isolated adrenaline. So we're really happy with that. But the team that we're working with at Honkaku, I haven't even actually tasted any of these yet, but they, we hope to see some of the whiskeys here in February. And then they're also bringing in awamori and shochu and maybe some rum. And I just think the quality of really good Japanese whiskey, like what you have in front of you, is driving and fueling a want for all quality spirits from Japan. And you've already seen it. I'm sure you've got the Nika, gin and all of that stuff. They're really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to just add kind of more of those things into our portfolio, because I think it's going to be when the first few people discovered mezcal, but it was oh, holy crap, there's this world of Mexican spirits that I never knew existed. Tequila has to come from one plant, and it can be done beautifully, in the way of David's Ancestral. But
yeah, it is beautiful, isn't that, Travis?
That's one of the things Chris is mad at me about.
Oh, I'm sorry to reignite that fire. I just keep a bottle here next to my desk for when I need it.
Well, Chris, that's why it's out of stock, because Monique has been drinking.
This is a tiny sample bottle from batch 1. And then I always keep my this is my glass from Mesante that I bought from Pedro. This is what you drink out of when you go to Mesante as well. I got to keep these things here. That's the only way I can keep sane, Travis, through our days of meetings, virtual meetings. But so I think what's going to happen is, as we start bringing in shochu and awamori and doing all of this education, the people who are really into quality Japanese spirits, it's going to be pretty mind-blowing as we start exploring the breadth of flavors and the spirits made by these. It is so much like Mexico, made by these families in these little tiny places that these exporters went and found. It's going to be really, really fascinating.
That is so cool. I mean, obviously good stories are always fun. They're, good stories, but, getting interesting flavors in my mouth, that's what I live for. That's, the more and more I get to do that and experience an entirely different universe based on just something that I'm tasting in a different way that I've never experienced it before. That's just so exciting.
Yeah. It's going to be great. We're super, super stoked about it. It's going to be good. Because, it's the whiskey category gets more crowded, but as real authentic producers with good stories and transparency come forward, we want to be the ones, to partner with them and continue to grow, our family in that same way. So Yeah, whiskey's like the Spotiki Japanese 21 that you're drinking. That really opens the door for that. So this is exactly along those lines.
I was just gonna say, like, I was talking to our buddy Nick, Mr. Nick Amano Dolan, who is half Japanese. And I said, "Hey, man, we're bringing some Awamuri to California," and like all caps back to me, "The minute it lands, you fucking call me." You know, I didn't even know what it was until that meeting, you know, and like I was just excited that like cool Japanese stuff was coming, because I feel like the foundation's been laid for a lot of the consumers to be like, well, if it's from Japan, it's got to be dope, right?
Yeah.
And so now, like, yes, Japanese whiskey is a crowded space, but it also leaves these building blocks for other Japanese spirits, like you were saying, like Naked Gin and all that sort of stuff. Like the expectation of quality is just already there, and people are going to be excited about it no matter what, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, Chris, any new interesting flavor I can put in my mouth, I'm for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Nick, the man gave me a taste of a mezcal the other night that I had never had before. It was just mind blowing. It was all like coriander and green and like lime, and it was insanely delicious. I never had a mezcal like it before. It was great, and unfortunately, it's not here in the U.S. He brought it home from his last trip. But.
I got a couple like that.
Next time. I was saying to Chris, Travis, we got to take him down on our next David trip.
You got to take me down too.
I know. Let's all go. I can't wait. I cannot wait. It's dreaming of that. If that's next May, you know, I don't know when it is, when we're allowed to travel again, when we have some kind of, I don't know, shot, inoculation, whatever it is, I cannot wait to go. Yeah. And Japan's probably in the cards for me this year too. So I hope so. I've never been. I've just been studying it from afar. And like, there's wonderful books on Japanese whiskey. Dave Broom's book is fabulous. And you can read it like a book. You know, it's not like looking at a bunch of reviews. It's like beautiful stories. And he's just so artful with language. It's really, really fantastic.
Yeah, I think is a fantastic writer.
Yeah. Well, and then the partner that we're bringing these other spirits in from, Honkaku, it's headed by Stephen Lyman. Stephen Lyman wrote the James Beard, or I'm sorry, was it James Beard? Was it Tales? What was it, Trav? I don't remember. He wrote this crazy award-winning book on Japanese drinks. It's called The Guide to Japanese Drinks, and it is fantastic. So he's our partner in that. So we also are going to just be so fortunate to have him, his partner Christopher. I mean, like some of the best, most renowned educators in the business, teaching us as well. So we've got a lot to learn before February.
That's so cool. You know, a couple years ago, I was up for a job in Tokyo at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. And I was like one of 6 people who even just been requested to apply for the job. And it was the most insane job application I think I've ever done. I mean, they had algebra on there, trigonometry. Like, I felt like I was all of a sudden back taking SATs, and it was so strange. I must have done well enough, though, that they'd asked me. That I didn't get hired for the first round. They were looking at filling several spots. But when the first contract was up, they called me again to run the entire F&B for the Mandarin Oriental, because they needed gunslingers from the U.S. and instead of you know, very artful, delicate Japanese craft bartenders.
So you're a taskmaster. Get it done.
Yeah, I mean, because it's an international hotel, so they have people from all over. They really needed a client. They needed a staff that could adapt to that. Unfortunately, I didn't take the position the second time it came around. I had other things I needed to do. But
I was fortunate for us, though, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah. I was really looking for that. I need that external validation on a regular basis.
Travis is not giving it to you enough.
I give it to him 4 or 5 times a week.
Don't isolate. Do not take this part of the conversation out of context.
That's true. Travis comes and sees me often enough. It gives me more than enough love.
Well, I can't wait to get out there and visit again someday. I see California in the cards again, probably before the end of the year. Trav, I'll probably go back out to Osacalis. I was telling Chris he's been aging some whiskey on site there that we're talking about doing something with. So
if you're able to get a sample of that, I would love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll see if I can pull one and like send one over. Yeah, it is really, really interesting. And it's just super, because it gets hot there, it gets really cold there. It's in a barn that is a barn. It's in a shed that's made out of hay. The walls are made out of hay and the floor is dirt. So it's pretty well insulated. But where he is kind of up in Santa Cruz or SoCal, you get really hot days, lots of sun, really cold nights. But it was all distilled on his Alembic cognac still. So it's more delicate, it's more nuanced. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, it's good fun.
Well, Monique, thank you so much. I really appreciate having your insights on the whiskey and then Japanese whiskey as well. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to leave people on with about this bottle or about anything else, but
I mean, you better buy it up while you can because it's going for 3 times the rate that we sold it in the UK, which I was just blown away by today. And then once this one's gone, it's gone. I mean, that's one of those things with these indie bottlers is, there's that limited supply. You spring for it, you buy it, and then it's gone. You can't duplicate it. So,
and that's the fun with Ghost Bottle too, is for this club, we drink things that once you drink them, they're gone. And that's sort of the joy of it and the misery of it all at the same point in time. So,
well, I hope you invite me back.
So much.
Very fun.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to stop the recording. Everybody else?
Cheers.
You'll be lucky if I get to tell you what we say afterwards anyway.
Yeah, exactly.